Imagine that you're late for work and there's just one road leading there. One. And then somebody just came and put a lock on it. Well, that's the situation in the Middle East right now. There's a strip of water in the Middle East. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. I'm sure you already heard about it. For those who didn't, around 1/5 of the global oil goes through there. It's around 21 miles at its narrowest point. And every tanker that comes from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates actually go through there. Oh, also Iran's oil. Well, last week, Iran closed it again. And as I think, already heard, there was a peace treaty going on. Well, not treaty, more of an agreement. And that didn't last more than 3 days. Opening, closing, opening, closing, opening, closing. What the hell are you doing? It's worse than the prostitute on the Red Street in Amsterdam. First, let me explain to you why that strip of water matters so much. And then everything else will make sense. So as you can see in the image, the Strait of Hormuz is situated between Oman and Iran. And that is the only way in and out of the Persian Gulf. So like the Persian Gulf is a bathtub and the Strait of Hormuz is the drain. But in our case, this bathtub is full of oil, not water. Every single day, about 20 million barrels of oil pass through that strait. It's about 20% of the entire world use. Saudi Arabia's oil go through it, Iraq's oil go through it, Iran's oil go through it, United Arab Emirates oils go through it. Like, even Qatar's natural gas go through it. And we use that stuff to heat our homes. And by us, I mean Europe and Asia. And here's the important part. There's no shortcut, there's no other way. Well, right now, Saudi Arabia already has a pipe that goes around, but it can only process around 5 million barrels per day. Well, that's about 25% of what goes through the strait. But for the natural gas, there's no other way. There's no pipes. Zero. As logic tells us, when the Strait of Hormuz closes down, or people panic that it might close down, the prices of oil and gas go up. And if those go up, everything goes up. Why? All the plastic is made out of petrol. Everything needs to be transported. We need energy to run everything. And well, that's petrol. And we also have to think a little bit about the countries that will rely 100% on this transport, on this logistics through the Strait of Hormuz. And why? Because, well, they don't have their own production. They don't have stocks. And yeah, what's going to happen in a month? What's going to happen when winter comes? Maybe some of them are from the warmer climates, and that's okay. But not all of them are. My cat. The cat kissed me. So the analyst said that if the strait actually remains closed, well, the price of barrel can go up to $100, maybe even $170 per barrels. And at that level, you start getting something that the economists call stagflation, which is basically the worst combination. Prices go up, but the economy slows down at the same time, which is bad. You have your pain going in two separate directions at the same time. We're getting poorer, things are getting more expensive. And we can thank Trump for that. Now let me tell you how we got to this point, to this situation. Let's go back to February 28th of this year. So the United States and Israel has launched a special operation called Epic Fury. I mean, who picked this name? I'm literally thinking about the Avengers when I hear that name. In just 12 hours, around 900 airstrikes have been launched on Iran. They hit military infrastructure, they hit resources stockpiles, they hit missile stockpiles, let's not forget about the children and the school that they hit and the hospital that they hit. Well, you know, people don't really talk about this, but going back. So they even assassinated the leader of Iran, whose name was Ali Khamenei. I'm not sure if I said that right. You know, after going after the president of Venezuela, I also wonder who's next. Here's what makes this moment even harder to process. So at the exact time those airstrikes were being planned, the USA and Iran were in peace talks in Oman. The mediator said that real progress was being made. Iran had reportedly offered to even offer concessions. A follow-up meeting was set in Vienna, and Donald Trump, he wasn't really that pleased with the negotiations. So he went ahead and authorized the strikes. And in those strikes, out of the American taxpayer money, one of those missiles has hit a school. The school was called Minab and was near Bandar Abbas. So I can tell you that that school was indeed near a naval base. But the Tomahawk missiles that are being used by the Americans, well, weren't they the smartest ones out there, and they could see anything from anywhere down to the centimeter? Which makes it a bit odd of not knowing or insinuating that you don't know that it was there or it was a mistake. So about 170 people were killed in that airstrike, mostly children. Yeah. That was one of the biggest mistakes they did at the beginning, because right now that school became martyr, and that touched the whole world. That school is being used right now in every single negotiation so far. And if you've seen in the FIFA World Cup, the airplane that brought the players, the seats of the airplane, well, they had the children's backpacks with them. I guess the USA and Israel call this justice. So Iran responded with waves and waves and waves of rockets, hitting everybody. US embassies, military bases, and even oil structures that are related in a way or another to the USA. The war was on. But here's something important to understand of how Iran fights its war. So Iran would have difficulties fighting the American military and Israel's military straight on. And they don't have the same firepower, and Iran knows that. But Iran has access to something else, the Strait of Hormuz. But an interesting factor that maybe we should pay a little bit more attention to it. That the USA is a net exporter of energy, if you haven't heard so far. Now, by threatening closing the Strait of Hormuz and all that, the prices go up for energy, for insurance, for everything. And that pain doesn't actually fall on America, because America is making money out of it. The more expensive the oil is, the more money it makes. And the actual pain falls on everybody else. And a lot of pretty powerful countries like China, like India, North Korea, Europe. When Iran actually threatens the Strait of Hormuz, they're not actually threatening the USA directly, but it's threatening to hold the whole world as a hostage. And it's like a clear message to all the other countries that this is not okay, and they should put more pressure on the USA to make them stop and go away. So it's a very effective strategy of identifying what the whole world needs and positioning yourself beside it. So you won't have to fight your enemy straight ahead. By early April, the fighting has been going for around 5 weeks. Oil was nearly $90 a barrel, inflation was rising, well, both sides had reasons to stop. Pakistan mediated on the 7th of April a ceasefire between the two conflicted sides. And it was just about 2 weeks of ceasefire just to be able to have some proper talks. Well, the ceasefire was supposed to start the next day, but on the 8th of April, I think we already know what happened. Yes, Israel happened. That same day, Israel launched what IDF described as being the most powerful strikes yet on Lebanon. So during the talks, they intensified the actions. It's kind of contradicting itself. And that strike led to at least 357 people killed. Lebanon calling it the Black Wednesday. And here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. Pakistan's Prime Minister confirmed that Lebanon was part of that ceasefire. Yeah, and that was the basis on which, well, Iran agreed on it. But of course, Netanyahu rejected that interpretation. And in his interpretation, he said, well, that ceasefire didn't include Lebanon, and then Trump and what's the guy's called? Vice, I think, and Vance, they went and backed Netanyahu. So Iran was left in a situation where the mediator was saying something and Trump was saying something else. But the deal that was supposed to stop all this killing, well, it had problems from the first day. It was being contradicted from the start. The ceasefire technically survived April, but barely. So the strait remained partially disrupted, strikes continued at the lower levels, and that gap, that disagreement about Lebanon stayed open and unresolved. This month, on June the 7th, it almost started again. Israel struck southern Beirut, and of course that Iran responded with waves and waves and waves of rockets. This representing the worst escalation that happened since February. And for a few days, everything looked like it was about just to restart from the start, going all over again. But by this point, the economic pressure started to build up globally and kept on building. And the Asian countries that, well, they rely on the Strait of Hormuz for oil and gas, they pushed for new talks, leading to both sides coming to the table for new negotiations. June the 17th, Versailles, France, on the sidelines of the G7 summit. President Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, man, those names are hard, electronically signed what became known as the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, 14 points. And in plain language, this is what it was included in it. A 60-day pause of fighting, the Strait of Hormuz opening with no tools. Open to all ships for 60 days. The US stops its naval blockade on the Iranian ports and lets Iran sell his oil. And they can do that by issuing waivers on the sanctions that they also put. The Iran's assets that were frozen abroad, well, they get unfrozen. And for Iran to reaffirm that they won't build nuclear weapons. And then there's what was not in the deal. No agreement on what Iran will actually do with its nuclear program. No deal on Iran's nuclear stockpile. And those things were, kicked down the road. We'll figure them out as we move on. And then the oil prices went down by around 8%. Pakistan announced that Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz. It felt like something finally shifted. Then on June 19th, that's just like 3 days ago when this is filmed. Guess what? Yep, Israel launched a new attack on Lebanon. Again, they kept on bombing. And again, civilians got stuck in the crossfire and died. And maybe you're wondering why civilians keep on dying and dying and dying. Well, a picture says 1,000 words, so I'll just leave this picture here. This is what's left behind the most moral army in the world. Now, here's what makes these events different from the ones in April. And this part also really matters. In April, there was a genuine dispute of whether Lebanon was included or not in the peace deals. The mediator said yes, the US said no. But this time, Iran pulled out the actual document that they signed. Point 1 of the Islamabad Memorandum, which is the agreement that Trump signed just 72 hours ago, it says this word for word. Immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Written right there, agreed by both presidents. Yeah, I know, there's a third. He never agrees on nothing. And well, the president that didn't sign that, well, he didn't care and he kept on bombing Lebanon. So Iran's position was simple. This is not some sort of interpretation dispute. This is not a gray area. The Chief of Commander of the United States, the President of the United States of America, has signed an official document giving his word and putting the USA reputations in that document, because if you don't hold your word as a world leader, as the President of the United States of America, why would the rest of the world trust you with anything? Or maybe Trump really wants this peace. Maybe he really does. And, well, Netanyahu is the problem. Well, America's response was that those strikes weren't covered. Okay? That the clause applied differently than Iran was reading it. And maybe, as all of us would have done, Iran didn't accept that as a response. The next day, on June the 20th, 3 days after the deal was signed, Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced the Strait of Hormuz was closed to all vessels traffic again. It's open for you now. You can pass. This is the Strait of Cat. The US military said that 55 merchant ships have passed through that strait. So Vice President Vance, along with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they all flew to Switzerland for like an emergency talk. Iran said the US must honor its commitments before anything else would happen. Well, the talks are ongoing as I'm recording this, and the oil prices are also ongoing upwards. And here's the problem that nobody can solve. But for that, I want to take a step back and explain what's happening. It's not just random. There's a real structural problem in all of this. And until it's gonna be addressed, this cycle will just go on and on. The US and Iran are able to make a deal. They've done it twice. But every time they do, the deals break for the same reason: Israel. And we can see a pattern in this. Israel is not a part of those agreements. They're a sovereign country that they make their own decisions and they take their own military actions. And those military decisions, especially that they're funded by American tax-paying money and they're using the American technology, well, they use this to keep on striking Lebanon and demolishing the cities to make more space for I wonder what. But here's the bind. Benjamin Netanyahu leads a coalition government, right? Inside that coalition, there are far-right members and partners who strongly oppose any ceasefire that leads, well, Hezbollah forces armed at their northern borders. From the way they're talking, as long as Hezbollah is in Lebanon, that is its northern borders. So the whole Lebanon, for example. Because as we have seen in Gaza, well, they will say that they have to hunt their enemies. And, well, they will go through all of Lebanon if nobody does anything about it. Because Netanyahu needs those partners to stay in power, so, he keeps on striking Lebanon. And round and round and round and round it keeps on going, like an endless cycle. And in June, they tried a better wording in the document. They tried mentioning the Lebanon, the exact country's name inside that the document. There will be no way of saying it's a confusion or misinterpretation. The problem is that the United States cannot hold Israel accountable. They cannot enforce what they signed on Israel. So I wonder how this would actually go. There's a couple of possibilities. Iran accepts to leave Lebanon out, or Israel joins the negotiations table, or maybe Israel comes to a conclusion with Hezbollah. But yeah, right now nothing is clear. But none of those have happened. And as long as they won't do every deal that is the same, that will have the same end result. And we didn't even get to talk about Africa, that the fertilizer comes from there, and there are going to be food shortages all around the world. And if there's food shortages and rising prices and lower income, especially in the third world, well, they're going to migrate. And where are they going to come? to other countries, which will put more strain on them, and it's gonna be chaos. But did you know that America has one of the largest stockpiles of fuel? And they went to Venezuela before starting all this, which Venezuela is one of the biggest countries with petrol in the world. If the price per barrel of petrol goes to over 100, well, at that level, every central bank in the world has way less room to cut down interest rates. They have to fight the inflation again, including the Fed, including the ECB, which means that mortgages will stay high, loans stay high, business costs stay high. One strip of water, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. That will be connected to if you can afford rent this month or not. So as we're ending this video, here is where we stand today. The Strait has a dispute status. Maybe it's gonna get divorced, maybe it's gonna get a relationship, who knows. France is in Switzerland. Iran wants the US to stop Israel from bombing Lebanon. Then the US says that, well, Lebanon is not covered. The deal that was signed was actually real. It just couldn't survive. Between the gap of what the American president promised and what will Israel actually do. And sadly, that gap didn't close. It didn't even get smaller. The question is not anymore if US and Iran can have a deal. They already had two. The question is whether Israel will fuck it up again. Nobody has answered that question yet. But until they do, those 21 miles of water, well, stay in play. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, and maybe want to see more of this cat, subscribe. And like, please. Bye.